So good morning and welcome to our agency Cardinal Security Officer Forum for Statewide Security. This forum was especially created for you to both inform and level set on a variety of Cardinal security related topics. And we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. We have a packed agenda for today's presentation, so let's dive right in. The first half of our session will focus on access to the Cardinal system and resources to gain support and assigning appropriate access to your users. Moving forward, we'll delve into the security forms with Karen Hines. Not only will we go through step by step, but we'll also shed some light on some commonly overlooked details within these forms. Correcting these issues is crucial as they play a vital role in our rigorous auditing process. I urge you to pay close attention to this process so that we can expedite the security provisioning process for your users. Following the form review, we'll take a short break, and after the break, Latanya Forum will shift to the annual review process, which is set to kick off on Monday, October 2nd. And then finally, we'll circle back and wrap up with some additional support resources available to you. Thank you for your attention, and let's make the most of our time together. This next section provides an overview of those of you who may have been with us over the last decade during the HCM project as a Change Network member or as a new member to our CSO community. It's about the who, what, and how people get access to Cardinal, as well as important resources you need to use as a CSO. This first slide describes in detail the Cardinal user types. And as you might remember from information you've seen or learned, we have two types of users in Cardinal. The first is a core user, and then everybody else who's an employee automatically receives ESS user access. Now, we'll really be focusing on core users today because they're the ones that are granted Cardinal security access based on security forms that you submit. The ESS users are individuals who are employees, but they would also have access to information such as their name, address, print W-2s if you're a payroll agency. So additional information that those users might need access to. That access is granted automatically when the employee is hired by the HR administrator based on their job attributes. Additionally, that information about ESS access is typically shared by the HR administrator or a designee at the individual agency to help assist those users gain access into the system. I'm now going to hand over this presentation to Karen Hines, one of our security team leads, who's going to take this into more detail.
Hello, we're going to first talk about who needs this Cardinal security form. You need to submit a Cardinal security form if you are requiring any type of core access. This is for both HCM or for finance. Any access basically beyond the employee self-service. Anytime that you want to add or update core user roles for an employee or a contractor. When you need to lock out a contractor, you also need to complete a Cardinal security form. There are also times when you do not need to submit a Cardinal security form. If the employee only needs self-service access, this is automatically provided to them and no forms are necessary. If you're only wanting to change a user's name or email address, no security form is required, as your HR administrator can handle these types of items. For terminated employees, once your HR administrator puts in their termination on their job data record, systematically, all core roles will be removed and no security form is required. We have a number of items that are helpful and available for you on our Cardinal Security website. This slide will show you how to navigate and get to these items that you may need. So you're going to go to the Cardinal website, go into resources and then security, and you'll see a whole section there that talks about statewide user access. The materials on this portion include the security handbook, instructions for filling out the form, a listing of all primary permission lists for both finance and HCM, as well as the current statewide security access form. Go into a little bit more detail on the security handbook is that this is very helpful as it includes all sorts of information about each role. It gives the description of the role and any other considerations, if there's buddy roles or restrictions, separations of duties, and any additional approvals that might be required. We mentioned restricted roles. So some roles have certain conditions that need to be met in order to assign a certain role to a user. As the Cardinal Security Officer, it's your responsibility to ensure that this criteria is met before trying to assign these roles to any of your users. Buddy roles are also items that, in some cases, two roles in Cardinal need to be assigned together in order to have the correct access. So an example of that would be if somebody needed to have the absent supervisor role. In this case, they also need to have the time and labor supervisor role. And both roles must be selected on the Cardinal Security form. We also have the primary permission list. As I mentioned earlier, this will be two different tabs. One will have finance permission lists and one will have HCM permission lists. You can filter this by your business unit and you can see all of the permission lists that are allowed for you for that particular business unit. You also have a column at the far right that states statewide access group equals yes. If this does say yes, then it requires DOA general accounting approval before you can select this permission list on a form.
So Karen, I'm going to pause you and just ask a quick question that came in. So we have a question that says, related to removal of access. So the question is, what are you saying that we no longer have to submit a remove form for Cardinal financials when an employee leaves?
That is correct. And it's not just for financials, it's also for HCM.
And the differentiator, we did say employee, that does not include contractors, which obviously are not employees and do not have employee numbers, are for a very limited number of people who are level 4 HR employees. And essentially those individuals do not have employee numbers in Cardinal. They do not have ESS access, and that would include in places like ports, for instance, but they're very few and far between. You would need a security form to remove those individuals.
That is correct. As well as if you're not seeing these roles being removed, you may want to consult with your HR administrator to ensure that they've processed their termination on their job record.
That's a good point. So if that termination is not processed in Cardinal, that individual will still have access. So HR has to keep up with their side of the process as well. So
Yes, and that program that does this runs every evening. So if the HR administrator goes ahead and processes their termination with an effective date of today, then this evening, when the process is run, all of those core roles will be removed for that user.
Great, thank you.
Now let's dive into the actual Cardinal security form. We've put together a few little guidelines that might be helpful when filling out the Cardinal security form. We already talked about where the forms are located on the security page. And it's always important to download a new copy of the security form each time you need to use one to ensure that you have the latest version. These must be submitted by the Cardinal security officer, or the Cardinal security officer needs to be copied on the email when it is submitted. You can submit more than one form on the same email, but we ask that each form be scanned separately as this is required, and make sure that they're scanned in numerical order by page number. It's also helpful to have less than 5 forms on the same email to avoid any kinds of confusion, as well as it's helpful if you have the user's name in the subject line, just in case you need to search and find that information at a later time. When there's a change to the security form that we make to make an update, we send an email to each Cardinal security officer notifying them that the update is there and what date the old forms will no longer be accepted. We understand that when we put a new form out there, that you may have some that are in process and still awaiting signature. So we usually allow a bit of time before we require you to use the new form. And also note that forms are usually processed within 3 business days. Okay. This section I find is being extremely important and helpful, as it includes some queries that you can run as a Cardinal security officer to assist you when you're filling out the form, or if you just find that you need to obtain some more information about your users that have core roles within your agency. My favorite is the first one on this one, which is the VSEC user FIN HCM roles query. This gives you a little bit of everything. The user ID, description, email address, you name it, it pretty much gives you everything. As well as it also includes every role that that user has in both HCM and in finance. And it can also be run in both HCM and finance and provide information for both portions. The next query is a great one for just I need basic information real fast. So it's the VSEC user prof email details query. This can be run in HCM, and it gives you a straight information about what the Cardinal user ID is. That's usually a big question. What the description is and primary permission list that they currently have. The next 2 are also helpful queries if you just need to find information about what one person has as far as their roles are concerned, or if you have a particular role and you want to see how many people in your agency have those. Also understand that as a Cardinal security officer, you should be able to run these queries. If you can't run a query in HCM, please put a form in for yourself and request the TA reporter role, as this will allow you access to these queries. Now, the first query that I told you was my favorite. Provided a little screenshot of what that looks like on here. And as you can see in the top section, that's your data that you can put in to find out any information that you want. So in this case, I put a partial email address with a percentage after on there and put a percentage in the rest of the items that require it. And in this case, I got Wile E. Coyote's information in all roles that they have in both HCM and finance. You can also run this if you want to for your agency as a whole. So instead, you put a percentage in email address in this case. In business unit, you could put your business unit and it will give you a whole list of every user in your agency and every role that they have. This might be helpful for some Cardinal security officers. The next query, the VSEC user prop email details query, is the one that kind of gives you the quick down and dirty information. So in this case, I did the same thing where I ran it by email ID, and I didn't even put the whole email ID in there. I put a percentage after it. So it comes up and provides me, and I can see in that first portion that comes out there, oh, well, this person's user ID is right here. So this is a helpful one when you're filling out the form, and the only thing that you need is the Cardinal user ID. You could also run this by just the user ID or by the employee ID. All right, let's dive into the form. The first section is the security action requested portion. In this case, you're going to either select add update core user access or remove lockout core user access. For the first one, for add update, you're going to put this, select this to grant core user access or update existing core user access. The second box, the remove lockout core user access, will be for a lockout for a contractor. You can also select this if you want to remove core access for, say, a user moved to a different department and no longer requires core user access. All right. In the user information section, you're going to put for the name in the last name, first name, and middle initial format. In the business email address, we want to ensure that that is the actual business email address and ensure that your HR administrator has added this business email address in Cardinal. If a user's email address changes, meet with your HR administrator and ask them to make that update. All right, the query we just spoke about, the VSEC user prof email details, is a good query to find out exactly what your employee ID is for this next section. This will be 11 digits and it is assigned to security form. Full 11-digit number is required. And then the Cardinal user ID that running this query helps to find out what this actual number is. We also know that typically with new users, it is the same as the employee ID, but it's not always the case. So it's always best to run the query. It is noted that it is definitely not the email address, so please do not add them there. The only time that this field should ever be blank is if you have a new contractor. In that case, we will assign a Cardinal user ID for that user. All right. So of course, for the user's job title, you want to add the user's current job title. For the business unit, this is always the 5-digit business unit. So if you typically say I'm in 151, it would be 15100. Please put the entire business unit number in the space. In the department ID, please enter just the department ID. It's not necessary to include extra zeros before or after. But the department ID should be there in full. Next, we'll talk about the contractor section. So the contractor box needs to be checked if you want this person to be put up in Cardinal as a contractor. This is a user that does not have a Cardinal employee ID. Occasionally, it's also for users that work at more than one agency. Typically, if a user works at more than one agency, then the primary agency will have the account that includes the employee ID in it. The secondary agency would be set up just as a contractor would. If the contractor box is checked, then you need to also include the supervisor's name and employee ID in that section as well. It's not necessary to fill out the supervisor name and employee ID if that contractor box is not checked. Okay. Now we're into the finance primary permission lists. If you're adding any finance roles, or the user has current finance roles, you'll select only one primary permission list from the drop-down box. Now you'll want to refer to that primary permission list file that we talked about. And you'll go to the Fin tab and select the primary permission list that you would like to, based upon your agency and what permission lists are allowed. We have a section after this that says, check read-only access to FinBox if they only need generic read-only access to finance. What this does is it provides them with 3 roles: the PeopleSoft user role, the Cardinal reporter role, and the Cardinal viewer role. These roles are automatically granted to users if they have any other finance roles. All right. This next section always has a number of questions. It's the finance expense approvers profile section, and it's only used for expense approvers and does not necessarily represent the user's actual role. So the person who has this designation may not be the actual fiscal officer at the agency, but it's the person who approves the expenses at this level. Only one person per department may be selected for each agency. Now, say I want to add someone as the fiscal officer for agency 12600, and I want them to have approval access for every department in the agency. Then what I would do is check the fiscal officer box, and then in the box below that, I'd put the agency number and all departments. If you're a larger agency and you split these by departments, one person may have one department and another person may have 2 or 3 different departments. Most smaller agencies use all departments. If you want to change this from one person to another, then we ask that you provide 2 security forms. You'll have one form where you check the box to remove the profile, and we'll take it away from that person, and then another form to add it to the new user. If you send in a form for a person without one to remove it from the previous person, we will typically send it back and ask for more information and a new form. All right, the financial module roles. In this section, you're going to check all of the finance roles that your user needs. It's important to remember that any roles that a user currently has and are not checked will be removed. This is where running that VSec user fin HCM roles query that we talked about will be very helpful, as that will show all roles that currently has. You'll want to refer to the security handbook for all descriptions and any restrictions or buddy roles to ensure that everything is accounted for. If the voucher approver role is checked, you'll find that you also need to fill out a section at the top of page 2. In the first box, you're always going to enter the 5-digit business unit that the user will approve vouchers for. So if they only need to approve for 12300, that's all you'll put in this account, in this box. If you have an agency that you have multiple business units and they need to approve for more than one, you'll go ahead and add that in this section as well. The second box is only for a select few agencies that are listed on the form. And in this case, those agencies would enter the departments also that the users will approve the vouchers for. It's not necessary to fill this out if you are not one of these agencies. And in the same fashion, for the journal approver, it will also have a section that is very similar to the voucher approver. And in the same fashion, you'll enter in the first box the 5-digit business units that the user will need to approve journals for. As well, in the second box is only for the select agencies that are listed. Okay. For the BI ad hoc user role, it's important to note that this role does not give you access just to BI. And typically users will not ever require this access. But remember that any user that has any financial roles automatically has access to BI, and no role is necessary for that outside of that. As we go into the HCM portion, we also have a primary permission list section for this. So you'll want to go back to your primary permission list file and click on the HCM tab and use the drop-down box to pull out all of the permission lists that are allowed for your agency. And you'll select that and put that in this section as well. Same as the other, only one permission list is allowed. For the roles section, you can again use that roles query that we pulled earlier and ensure that all of your roles that the user currently has and needs are selected, as ones that are not checked will be removed. And again, refer to the statewide security handbook for any descriptions, restrictions, or buddy roles. All right, into approvals. We require the user, the supervisor, and the security officer approvals. Their names need to be printed on the form and the date must be filled out. Digital signatures are only valid if they include a system-generated date stamp. DocuSign approvals are also allowed, provided they include the log that shows that they approved. We also will allow email approvals for those that are unable to sign or provide a valid digital signature. In this case, it needs to derive from the business email account from that user. And the approvals need to be in the same email chain and then forwarded by the Cardinal security officer with the form. The form must be attached with the email approval, and it must show that it was sent from the individuals that are approving. When they are approving by email, we ask that they use, please accept this email as my approval of the attached form as the either user, supervisor, or Cardinal security officer, as this helps us with our audits. When DOA approval is required, prior to sending the security form to the Cardinal security mailbox, for any segregation of duties, exception, any request for statewide permission lists, these need to go to the DOA General Accounting email prior to sending it to Cardinal Security. Generally, segregation of duty role combinations are not granted to Cardinal users, but exceptions can be requested for agencies where limited staffing is available or special circumstances exist. When this is the case, then request a separation of duty role combination for a user. Agencies must first submit the written request to the General Accounting DOA email address. This must be included with the exception requested and justification. Once approval has been received, you'll complete the Cardinal Security form and you'll email it to the General Accounting email address. At this time, the DOA approver will go ahead and add their name, signature, and date and send it to Cardinal Security for submission. The same methods of approval are allowed for DOA approvers. The comments and notes section can be used for any additional information, but they cannot be a substitute for completing the form properly. We have some agencies that use this for internal approvals that they have. If you put a note in this section that says, match this person's access, this will not be accepted unless, of course, all of those roles are also checked on the form, but we will not confirm that.
All right, so thank you, Karen, for walking us through that deep dive into the forms. We have a couple of questions that people have asked throughout the presentation. And if you have your question, don't hesitate to type that into the QA panel. So our first question is about reports or queries. Are we able to run reports for the statuses? I'm assuming he means for contractor or HR level 4 statuses. And if that's not correct, if you'll just circle back with your question, we can update our response.
Yes, the queries will include contractors.
Okay, great. And it'll include the level 4, but it won't tell you that they're a contractor. Is there a place where that kind of guidance is, you can derive that information?
Yes, you'll see in many of our queries, they also have a section for employee ID. So if that employee ID section is blank, then you can tell that the user is a contractor.
All right, perfect. All right, our next question is, can we please review the requirements for a CSO and how many an agency can have?
An agency can have 2 Cardinal Security officers, and they need to fill out the form for the authorized signatory form and send it to the DOA compliance section in order for one to change.
All right, great. We have a question related to deactivation. How do we prove deactivation to the auditors? I'm assuming in relation to those individuals who are employees who are then termed. How's that proved to the auditors?
You can run any one of the queries for that employee and see that they no longer have any core roles.
All right, we'll hold just another minute to see if we get any more questions in. We are. All right. Are there any best practices in regards to finance having HCM access to run payroll reports? So that's a great question. There is a I believe there's a payroll read only report, or sorry, role. So if you go to the handbook, you can look at that, and you can talk about it with your financial officer or your payroll officer and see if they think that's appropriate to add that access to that individual so that they can better do that reconciliation. But if you do have any other questions, certainly you can enter a ticket or submit a question associated with that. Circling back to the auditor question, they've been asking for proof of deactivation by date.
We don't currently have anything that will provide them with a query that gives them dates of when people are deactivated. That's something that we can check into and see if it's even possible to provide that information. But at this time, we do not have something like that.
If an employee, so this is about users who have who work at 2 agencies. If an employee has a core role and their second agency, they'll also be required to have core roles. I think that they're asking, how do you handle that?
Okay, perfect. Good question. Okay, so then the primary agency would put in a form as they normally would with their employee ID and the Cardinal user ID that they currently have and such. The secondary agency would put in a Cardinal security form as though that user is a contractor. So they would fill the Cardinal security form out just like they would for any other contractor. This will allow them to log in with 2 different IDs and only see the particular items that they need to for both their primary agency and their secondary agency.
Right. So this is someone just wanting to confirm what they've heard today, because this is new information to them, that a security form is not required when staff are terminated who have core roles. Do we need, for audit purposes, to get a copy from HR?
Not sure what they're talking about a copy of.
Might be the term, right? Because the term is the thing that drives the removal of those roles.
Right, and that would be by the effective date that was on there, as well as you could have that effective date information and then run the query the next day and confirm that those users no longer have those core roles.
Are we able to filter queries between core users, ESS users, and contract users?
Once the queries are run, you can download them to Excel and you can filter them in any fashion that you prefer.
And it doesn't have a column that has those individual designations, right? You don't see ESS user or core user or contractor. You have to derive that information. For instance, contractors do not have employee IDs. ESS users have very specific roles assigned to them that are not core users, but you could probably pivot table that or something associated with how that works at your agency.
Correct. And all of the self-service role names will have SS in the name. So you can filter out anything with SS in the name and it would give you just the core roles.
Great. That's a great hint. So just to repeat, all the ESS users have an SS in their role name. So that is a great tip for filtering those as well. We have a question about email notifications. Do we still get email notifications of deactivation?
Only if a form is used. So if the user has their core roles removed systematically, there is no email notification.
If they do not have core users at their primary agency, will they be required to have core roles at both? Users are never required to have core user roles. It is completely associated with the roles that they need to complete or support their job. So, we would not require somebody who works at, for instance, Department of Health and has a core user role, and it also happens to be working at community colleges to have that same core user role. They may only have, an ESS role associated with that, and maybe they enter their time. So do you want to add anything to that?
The only thing that I would add to that is that when we talked earlier about how we handled people with two different roles or two different agencies, we talked about that they'd have two different accounts. They'd have a regular account and then they have a contractor account. Well, we do this for a reason, so that I think in their case, what they're asking is so that if they have core roles in only one of those, that they're only going to have access for that particular agency that has granted those core roles. And that goes back to your permission list that we talked about, and that drives what access that person's going to have. They would never have access, say they give, finance access to a person in one agency, and they would never then be able to see the other agency's information.
That's a great point. Thank you. Does a disablement of an email address in Cove-AD cancel access to Cardinal via ACTA?
It does not cancel their access, but it essentially does not allow them access to Cardinal. So they wouldn't be able to log in because they wouldn't have that authentication sitting there in the background. But their account in Cardinal would still be there in available. They just wouldn't be able to log in.
If a user is inactive in the Cove Active Directory, the email is disabled. Does the security officer always get notification when security access has been granted for core user requests?
Yes. Both active Cardinal security officers are always sent an email notification when a form has been completed.
We have just a few more questions. Is there a query available for us to check to see anyone removed from the system due to terminations?
No, there's not a query that just shows you who has been terminated, but the query that I showed you in the beginning of this presentation, I showed or spoke to how you could run a query to show all of your active users with every role that they have within your agency. So you could pull that at your discretion and ensure that people who have been terminated are not on that list.
Are terminated/separated employees notified that they still have limited ESS access for 18 months following termination? I'm not understanding this and have not heard about it before. This would be very useful to tell separating employees. I'm going to go ahead and start with this question and have the security team interject any additional information. It is a responsibility of the HR administrator to share this information with those termed or separated employees. Additionally, it's critical that that HR administrator update the email address if the individual is accessing Cardinal with a business type email, an agency provided email. That individual needs to be able to use their personal email instead of the business type email, unless they're coming from an agency like a college where they allow them to keep the email addresses afterwards, but that's a footnote. But if they're working at VDOT, for instance, they're going to separate that employee. That email address will be deactivated in Active Directory, and there is no way for that individual to get into the system. Nor can the Cardinal team give them access. Only the HR administrator at that agency can update that individual's email and let that individual know that they're able to access W-2s, and then some limited information from an ESS perspective. So circle back with your HR individuals at your agency to figure out what their process is for these terminated employees. We see a lot of frustration come in from those users who are trying to get access once they're termed, especially retirees. What is the expected turnaround time by Cardinal for security requests?
We have an SLA of 3 business days to return any, to complete any Cardinal security forms. I do understand that there are times that we get them much quicker. But as you know, sometimes there are times that we're busier than other times. So understand that they should be all sent and completed within 3 business days.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and move forward. We stick around a little bit longer. We want to quickly highlight some support items for you as CSOs, as well as great information for your HR administrators. If you feel like after this you might have a gap in the internal processes at your agencies about how people are being notified about access or best processes for them getting into the system or any other resources. So from a resource perspective, in the last couple of months, we've created these new support guides for major user groups. And we recommend the new user support guide for anybody who's new to your agency. It provides them links on how to access and log in Cardinal, training resources and support, as well as references to the other guides that are listed below based on the types of users they are. It's really important for our users to be able to self-identify. So this is really the starting point for all of our users who are coming into the system, is that Cardinal new user support guide. So, when you receive this presentation, if you didn't already, or if you have it, you can go ahead and click on that link. It'll take you to the support guide page, and then it will list all of our guides. The second one is associated with ESS support. This is designed specifically for ESS users who might only use Cardinal for benefits enrollment once a year, but also for those ESS time and attendance or TA users who submit their timesheets every week. So it has a variety of resources, including some videos that help ESS users navigate around the system, as well as tutorial videos and WBTs for individuals who need to enter their time. Now, generally, they're not looking to the CSOs to, for this information, but if you find somebody who's struggling, this is where I'd send them in conjunction with your agency's time and attendance administrator support. The next guide is for our core users, and what I really like about this is great information even for our core users who have been core users for the last year or two, depending on when you came into the system, and includes some common FAQs and support documents by module area. So this is a really great tool for those users who basically interact with the system from a day-to-day perspective. This next page is about Cardinal System Access Support, and we've talked a little bit about this when we were talking about the form, but if you haven't been to the Cardinal website, under Applications and under Portal, I do encourage you to go ahead and navigate to this link. What's on there is really a deep dive into user types, and it's going to help you assist your end users, or help your HR administrators assist their end users, or for those users independently to help understand. For instance, are you a Cove user supported by Vita with an agency provided email? Then it shows you that you're able to use your network ID and password to access Cardinal. If you have a personal email or you're a non-Cove agency, you must first register before accessing Cardinal. And there's essentially a matrix on this page that walks the user through all of that. And for those of you who have registered before or are at an agency who needs to have individuals who register use personal email accounts, the registration process is complex and it requires the users to click in and out of emails as well as through the Okta process. And because of this, we have created the Cardinal Registration Quick Start Guide, which basically walks those users through step by step. This guide is essential for anybody who needs to register. And when we sent this out to new users as part of the Go Lives, we were like, don't go it alone, use this guide. And we see the most success for individuals who need to register by using this guide. It also reminds them that they need their 11-digit Cardinal employee ID, and they can only typically get that from their HR or benefits professional, as well as ensuring that they're using the email address that's on file. So definitely you have people who are struggling, or you need to circle back with your HR professionals to see how they're supporting your ESS users. This is the ticket right here. This information is also linked in the new user support guide that was on the previous page. Then we have two other support documents that provide step-by-step instructions with big pictures, and they're for all user types. So if you have somebody who needs a bit more information or you have a challenging scenario, these two guides are on that page as well. Password tips. So this is something that we shared right before Go Live with individuals who were security SMEs as well as Change Network members. And if you don't already know this, I'm going to go ahead and read through the slide because it's really great information. If a password is entered incorrectly, the user will automatically be locked out after 3 failed attempts. If the user has forgotten a username or password, or lock themselves out, and they are a non-Cove user, so meaning they're not using their Cove account and network password, they're going to go ahead and be able to click that forgot password username link down at the bottom of the my.cardinal.virginia.gov. And then finally, just like users who do have Cove accounts, users are required to reset their passwords every 90 days, and they also need to ensure that they're following VITA's password requirements, which are very long and stringent, but that's the requirement. So they need to read on the page when that pops up and ensure that they're resetting their passwords appropriately. From a timeout perspective, Cardinal times out or terminates any sessions that are inactive after 30 minutes. This is especially important for administrative users or somebody who might be entering their timesheet and they may have been distracted. If they don't save this work, it will be lost. So we always recommend save your work often. And if you have multiple windows open, but you essentially haven't been active in them, that will time out in all of those windows. And then finally, a little tip up here that we can't put on the page is that your account will automatically unlock in 30 minutes. So if you're like, you've woke up a Monday and it's been a particularly long weekend and you forgot your ID, but then you do remember your password, if you wait that 30 minutes, it's going to go ahead and unlock. So just a little hint for all of us who are on the phone today. This is a quick reference to all the documents that we have referenced out today. So a reminder, if you don't have the security page already linked, make this a favorite. We don't change this page, but we often update all these. So ensure you're going back and downloading the latest handbook form, permission list, as well as if you do need to reference CSOs, then you'll have that list out there. The HCM training is a really great resource for individuals who are helping new users sign up for training. Agencies are required to support their users and let them know what type of training. I can't tell you what your agency has set up. It may be the CSO's roles to help those individuals understand what training courses they need to take. It may be an HR administrator role. Also, when we send the security email welcoming those new core users, we link them to this information as well. But most importantly, we just want to make sure that those individuals get the training that they need, because they can function in the system a lot better with it than without it. So the first stop is the HCM roles to training course mapping. That will tell you for every role what training we recommended. For anybody who was mapped or role mapped to those roles before go live, they've likely already taken that training. But if you are adding roles to people or adding new users, please encourage them to go to this and then to navigate over to the training that they need. Either that's web-based, we reference a couple of job aids, and then of course our instructor-led training. And then finally, for all of you, you've asked a lot of great questions today about queries. If you haven't taken the reports WBT, or you haven't run a query in a while, this job aid is essential. It will step-by-step help you through the process of how to run a query or how to even navigate to that query. So click this link and utilize that to get through your first query that you need to get to. And then we also have this tutorial video. If for some reason you just want to see your favorite Cardinal Carl friend, then you can go out and use our tutorial video. And then finally, some of you were asking earlier, in addition to the queries that we have listed in this deck, there is a reports catalog associated just for security. You can navigate to our Cardinal support website and click this link and it'll bring it up. As we add new security reports, we'll always keep this reports catalog updated. And then finally, from an agency support perspective, if you're unsure how things are supposed to work at your agency, we encourage you to circle back potentially with your fiscal officer or your HR director, or maybe you go a little deeper into your HR administrators for guidelines of how they're onboarding new people and what your role is in associated with those new onboarding. We get a lot of questions that either come into VCCC or into our project mailbox, asking about very specific things, especially associated to entering time. We send them back to their agency because every agency is different. They have their own policies or they have their own requirements. So we're often sending people back to the points of contact that we have on record for those specific agencies. For a reminder for everybody, from a VCCC help desk, we use this for all of our support tickets and issues related to Cardinal. A couple of things to note: if you make sure that you always put Cardinal in the subject line, it will automatically be routed to our queue. If it doesn't have Cardinal in the subject line, it could be in the abyss forever. So please make sure you always put Cardinal in the subject line so it gets to us as quickly as possible. In the email, provide as much detail about the issue that you're having, and then always make sure that you or the individual who's submitting this includes their name, address, and a phone number where they can be reached. And then finally, as Cardinal security officers, if you have questions or need assistance, you can send your Cardinal security related questions directly to the cardinal.security@doa.virginia.gov address. It looks like we have a couple of questions. I'm going to go ahead and flip over and look and see what is coming in. So the first one, from an annual review perspective, our auditors are questioning the timing of the fiscal year 23 access review. I would like to talk to someone on the Cardinal team. So David, it looks like probably the best thing for you to do is go ahead and send that question in to this mailbox, and you get it in, and they're going to be able to respond to you from about what your specific questions are. It looks like we have a access question. Sometimes I input my password several times and I know I'm using the correct password, but nothing happens. If I return later, I can sign in with the same password. It would seem to be a technology issue. Is there some way for the system to have a notice telling us what the issue is? I think the challenge with that is we may be giving too much information to hackers or other individuals if we are giving password hints, for instance. So that's really the challenge. I'm going to look to the security team to also provide some guidance there.
Yes, it's hard to tell exactly what the issue is at the time. You may be experiencing some network issues at the time. You can always put in a ticket, as she mentioned, with Cardinal in the subject line and explain what's happening for you at that particular moment. It's hard to tell outside of that what the issue is unless we can kind of monitor that.
All right, we have a specific question about a query that an individual ran for their user roles at their agency and filtered to view fin roles. I see that there are employees still on this report who are no longer employed here, but they have a role name of V_no access. Is this correct? And will these roll off in a set period of time?
Yes. So as we mentioned earlier, we have users that once that they terminate will still retain access for 18 months. So when this occurs, their user profile is not locked out for those 18 months, but it will show in the finance side that it's got the V no access role. In the HCM side, similarly, it will show a V term role. This way you can tell which users have been terminated, but still retain the access to view their items for self-service.
All right. So it looks like our questions are winding down. I want to thank you for your time and attention during this session. I hope you found it fruitful. We appreciate you and everything you're doing. We hope you learned something from this that you can take and help improve your processes back at your agency, or support you with submitting the best possible security forms. And we look forward to sending the email out on Monday for the annual review. Thanks again for your time.